What happens when arrogance meets genius? When a CEO's mockery collides with unexpected brilliance? And what occurs when the person you've overlooked for years turns out to possess the very skills that could save your company? This is the extraordinary true story of Elijah Hayes, a 58-year-old janitor who had been invisible to his colleagues for over a decade, quietly cleaning the offices of Langston Innovations while harboring a secret that would eventually shake the tech industry to its core. To his CEO and coworkers, he was just another maintenance worker, someone to be ignored, dismissed, and ultimately underestimated. But in a single moment of corporate arrogance, all of that would change. Picture this. A high-tech company's most expensive prototype vehicle refuses to start in the executive parking lot. Engineers scramble, executives panic, and the CEO, frustrated and embarrassed, spots the black janitor watching from a distance. In a moment of cruel mockery, he issues a challenge that he assumes will provide entertainment at the janitor's expense. Fix this, and my car's yours. What happened next would not only silence the laughter, but would expose the dangerous assumptions that permeate corporate America. This story isn't just about one man's hidden genius. It's about the systematic way our society overlooks talent based on appearance, job title, and racial bias. It's about the 61% of workers who have experienced workplace discrimination, the 25% of black workers who report facing racial bias at work, and the countless brilliant minds that remain invisible because they don't fit our narrow definitions of success. In an industry where diversity remains a persistent challenge, where unconscious bias influences hiring decisions, and where applicants with white-sounding names are 50% more likely to receive callbacks, Elijah's story represents both a wake-up call and a beacon of hope. It reminds us that genius doesn't wear a suit, brilliance doesn't carry a business card, and sometimes the most valuable employee in your company might be the one pushing a mop cart through your hallways. Elijah Hayes had not always been invisible. 23 years earlier, he had been at the forefront of the artificial intelligence revolution, a brilliant engineer whose groundbreaking work on adaptive learning algorithms had earned him recognition from MIT, multiple patents, and a position among the industry's most promising young talents. His 1992 paper, Adaptive Learning Algorithms in Automotive Navigation Systems, had been cited hundreds of times and had laid the foundation for technologies that would eventually become standard in modern vehicles. Born in Detroit in 1965, Elijah had grown up in a working-class family where education was valued above all else. His father, a mechanic at Ford Motor Company, had instilled in him both a love of learning and a deep understanding of how machines worked. His mother, a schoolteacher, had nurtured his intellectual curiosity and encouraged him to pursue his dreams despite the barriers that black professionals faced in the technology sector. The path to becoming a respected AI engineer had not been easy. Elijah had excelled academically, earning a full scholarship to MIT, where he was often the only black student in his advanced mathematics and computer science courses. He had faced the subtle racism that permeated academia, professors who questioned his qualifications, peers who assumed he was there because of affirmative action rather than merit, and industry leaders who seemed surprised by his competence. But Elijah's brilliance had been undeniable. His work on machine learning algorithms had caught the attention of Tech Dynamics, a cutting-edge company that was developing some of the most advanced AI systems in the world. For nearly a decade, he had been part of a team that was pushing the boundaries of what artificial intelligence could accomplish, working on projects that would eventually transform industries from automotive to healthcare. The turning point came in 2001 when Elijah discovered that the AI systems his team was developing had fundamental safety flaws that could lead to catastrophic failures. When he raised concerns about the potential dangers, he was told to focus on his assigned tasks and leave safety assessments to others. But Elijah couldn't ignore what he saw. The potential for these systems to cause harm was too great. His decision to become a whistleblower had been motivated by tragedy. His younger brother Marcus, a software engineer at a different company, had been killed when an AI-controlled manufacturing system had malfunctioned due to the same type of algorithmic flaw that Elijah had identified. The incident had been covered up, attributed to human error, rather than the systematic programming defects that had actually caused the fatal accident. When Elijah went public with his concerns about AI safety, the industry's response had been swift and devastating. He was labeled a troublemaker, a disgruntled employee, someone who couldn't be trusted with sensitive projects. His access to research funding was revoked, his job applications were rejected, and his reputation was systematically destroyed through a coordinated campaign of professional isolation. The blackballing had been thorough and effective. Despite his qualifications and track record, Elijah found himself unable to secure employment in the tech industry. Companies that had once competed for his services now refused to return his calls. Academic institutions that had once welcomed his research suddenly had no available positions. The network of professional relationships that had taken years to build evaporated overnight. The transition from respected engineer to maintenance worker had been both humiliating and necessary. With a family to support and bills to pay, Elijah had taken whatever work he could find. First, it had been temporary technical support roles that didn't require security clearances or extensive background checks. Then, as even those opportunities dried up, he had moved into facilities maintenance, where his intelligence and technical knowledge were neither required nor appreciated. For over 15 years, Elijah had worked as a janitor at various tech companies, watching from the sidelines as the industry he had helped to build continued to evolve. He had seen his own innovations implemented by others, his safety concerns eventually proven correct, and his contributions to the field forgotten or attributed to his former colleagues. The irony of his situation was not lost on him. He cleaned the offices of engineers who were working on projects that built upon his original research, maintained the equipment that utilized principles he had pioneered, and listened to conversations about technical challenges that he could have solved in minutes. But his knowledge remained invisible, hidden beneath a uniform that marked him as service staff rather than a technical professional. When Elijah joined Langston Innovations in 2018, he was just another maintenance worker in a company that prided itself on innovation and cutting-edge technology. The young engineers and ambitious executives who populated the gleaming offices had no idea that the quiet man who emptied their trash cans and cleaned their whiteboards had more technical expertise than most of them combined. The culture at Langston Innovations reflected the broader patterns of discrimination that pervaded the tech industry. Despite public commitments to diversity and inclusion, the company's leadership remained overwhelmingly white and male. The few black employees were concentrated in support roles, while the engineering and executive positions were filled by individuals who fit the industry's narrow definition of technical talent. The morning of September 15th, 2023, began like any other for Elijah Hayes. He arrived at Langston Innovations at 6:30 a.m., 2 hours before most employees, to begin his daily routine of cleaning the executive offices on the building's top floor. The early morning quiet gave him time to work without interruption, moving through the sleek corridors with the methodical precision that had characterized his approach to both engineering and maintenance. As he cleaned the conference rooms and executive offices, Elijah could hear the familiar sounds of the company's morning routine, beginning the hum of coffee machines, the chatter of early arrivals, and the electronic beeping of security systems being disarmed. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, he could see the executive parking lot where the company's leaders displayed their success through an impressive collection of luxury vehicles. The commotion began around 9:30 a.m. when CEO Clayton Riker arrived. For what was supposed to be a routine demonstration of the company's latest prototype, a $3.2 million self-learning autonomous vehicle that represented 2 years of development and millions in investor funding. The demonstration was intended for a group of potential investors and technology journalists who had gathered to witness what Riker had promised would be a revolutionary breakthrough in automotive AI. From his position cleaning the windows of the executive conference room, Elijah had a clear view of the parking lot scene unfolding below. The prototype vehicle, sleek and imposing, sat motionless as a team of engineers worked frantically under the hood. Riker, immaculately dressed in a custom suit that cost more than most people earned in a month, paced back and forth while barking orders at his technical team. "This is unacceptable," Riker's voice carried clearly across the parking lot, his frustration growing with each passing minute. "We have investors here. We have media coverage. And this thing won't even start. What am I paying you people for?" The engineers, led by Dr. Sarah Chun, the company's chief technology officer, had been working on the prototype for over an hour. They had run diagnostics, checked connections, and attempted various system resets, but the vehicle remained stubbornly unresponsive. The advanced AI system that was supposed to be the vehicle's defining feature appeared to be completely inert. "Sir, we're seeing some anomalies in the boot sequence," Dr. Chun reported, her voice tight with stress. "The primary neural network isn't initializing properly, and we're getting cascading errors in the secondary systems." Riker's response was immediate and harsh. "I don't want to hear about technical difficulties. I want results. We've got 20 minutes before this demonstration becomes a complete embarrassment." As the crisis deepened, more employees began gathering at the windows to watch the spectacle. A failure of such a high-profile demonstration would have serious consequences for the company's reputation and stock price. Investors had been promised a glimpse of the future, and instead they were witnessing a very public technical meltdown. It was during this moment of corporate crisis that Riker noticed Elijah watching from the window above. The sight of the janitor observing the scene seemed to trigger something in the CEOA need to redirect his frustration and assert his authority in front of his employees and potential investors. "Hey," Riker called out, his voice amplified by the building's acoustics. "You up there? Come down here." Elijah hesitated, understanding instinctively that this was not a situation where his presence would be welcomed. But Riker's tone brooked. No argument, and the gathering crowd of onlookers made it clear that ignoring the summons would only make things worse. As Elijah made his way down to the parking lot, he could feel the eyes of dozens of employees following his movement. The contrast between his maintenance uniform and the expensive suits surrounding him was stark, and intentional. Riker was clearly planning to use him as a prop in some kind of performance, designed to deflect attention from the technical failure. "Ladies and gentlemen," Riker announced to the assembled crowd, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "I'd like you to meet our senior technical consultant." The laughter that followed was uncomfortable and forced, but it served its purpose of establishing the social hierarchy that Riker wanted to reinforce. The CEO's next words would later be replayed millions of times across social media platforms, becoming a defining moment in corporate cruelty. "You think you're so smart, watching from up there? Let me make you a deal. Fix this piece of junk, and I'll give you my car. Hell, I'll give you my job if you can figure out what my team of PhD engineers can't." The crowd's laughter was louder this time, feeding off the CEO's cruel energy. Investors shifted uncomfortably, sensing that they were witnessing something inappropriate, but unsure how to respond. The engineers looked embarrassed, caught between their professional failure and their discomfort with their boss's behavior. Elijah's response was quiet and measured. "I'd be happy to take a look, sir." The simplicity of his reply seemed to surprise Riker, who had expected either refusal or grateful subservience. Instead, He was faced with calm professionalism that didn't fit the narrative he was trying to create. "Oh, you would you?" Riker's voice carried a dangerous edge. "Well, by all means, show us what you've got. But when you fail, and you will fail, I want everyone here to remember that some people know their place and others need to be reminded of it." What happened next unfolded with the kind of quiet precision that only comes from decades of experience. Elijah approached the prototype vehicle with the confidence of someone who understood not just its surface features, but its underlying architecture. He spent exactly 30 seconds examining the engine compartment, his eyes moving systematically across the complex array of sensors, processors, and connection points. "The problem is in the neural network initialization sequence," he said, his voice carrying the authority of technical expertise. "You have a corrupted bootloader that's preventing the primary AI system from accessing its learning algorithms. The secondary systems are failing because they're waiting for initialization. Signals that never come." Dr. Chun looked up from her diagnostic tablet, her expression shifting from skepticism to surprise. That's exactly what our deep diagnostics are showing. But how did you—" Elijah was already working, his hands moving with practiced efficiency through the vehicle's complex systems. He located the primary processing unit, identified the corrupted files, and began implementing a bypass that would allow the system to reinitialize properly. His movements were economical and precise, each action designed to address a specific aspect of the systematic failure. The original boot sequence was designed with insufficient error handling, he explained as he worked. When the primary learning algorithm encounters an unexpected data pattern, it triggers a cascade failure that locks out the entire system. You need to implement a recursive validation protocol that can handle edge cases without crashing the core processes. The technical explanation was met with stunned silence. The engineering team, who had been struggling with the problem for hours, found themselves listening to a maintenance worker describe solutions that they hadn't even considered. Within 5 minutes, Elijah had completed his work. He stepped back from the vehicle, wiped his hands on a cloth, and looked directly at Riker. "Try it now," he said simply. The CEO's face had gone through a series of expressions during the repair process, from smug anticipation to confusion to something approaching fear. He pressed the ignition button with the reluctant movements of someone who was no longer certain of the outcome. The prototype vehicle hummed to life immediately, its advanced systems initializing with the smooth efficiency that had been promised. To investors, dashboard displays flickered to life, showing the complex data streams that indicated the AI system was functioning perfectly. The demonstration that had been a disaster moments before was now ready to proceed. The silence in the aula parking lot was deafening. Every person present understood that they had just witnessed something extraordinary, not just a technical repair, but a complete reversal of the social dynamics that had defined the morning's events. The immediate aftermath of Elijah's repair was a study in corporate cognitive dissonance. Clayton Riker, faced with the undeniable evidence of his janitor's technical expertise, chose denial over acknowledgement. "Lucky guess," he muttered, his voice barely audible as he quickly closed the hood of the prototype vehicle. Anyone can get lucky once. The investors and journalists who had witnessed the exchange were not convinced by Riker's dismissal. Several approached Elijah directly, asking questions about his background and technical knowledge. But before any meaningful conversations could develop, Riker intervened, instructing security to clear the demonstration area and directing Elijah to return to his assigned duties. The CEO's response revealed the depth of his commitment to maintaining the corporate hierarchy that had been so dramatically challenged. Rather than celebrating the successful repair or acknowledging Elijah's contribution, he chose to minimize and marginalize what had occurred. The demonstration proceeded as planned, with Riker taking full credit for the prototype's functionality, while making no mention of the critical repair that had made it possible. But the attempt to bury the incident was complicated by the fact that dozens of employees had witnessed the exchange. By lunchtime, whispers had spread throughout Langston Innovations corridors. Engineers who had struggled with similar technical problems began seeking out Elijah, asking quiet questions about his background and expertise. Support staff, who had worked alongside him for years, suddenly saw him in a completely different light. The most significant development was the actions of Zoe Martinez, a junior developer who had been recording the demonstration for internal documentation purposes. Her footage, captured from the conference room window, showed the entire exchange in clear detail, from Riker's mocking challenge to Elijah's effortless repair. Initially, she had intended to use the video for a routine project report, but the more she watched the footage, the more she understood its broader significance. 2 days after the incident, Zoe made a decision that would transform both her career and Elijah's life. She uploaded the video to TikTok with a caption that read, "When your CEO mocks the janitor for being too smart." And then this happens. Genius has no uniform. Hashtag respect tall workers, hashtag hidden talent, hashtag justice at work. The videos spread across social media was explosive. Within hours, it had garnered 50,000 views and hundreds of comments from viewers who recognized the deeper implications of what they were seeing. The footage was shared across multiple platforms, reaching LinkedIn, where technology professionals began discussing the incident in the context of workplace discrimination and hidden talent. The response from the tech community was immediate and overwhelmingly supportive of Elijah. Industry leaders who had known him during his earlier career began coming forward, sharing their own stories about his contributions to AI development and the circumstances that had led to his blacklisting. Former colleagues expressed shock at learning what had happened to him, many admitting they had lost touch after his departure from the industry. Meanwhile, at Langston Innovations, the viral video was creating a crisis that went far beyond public relations. The company's stock price began to fluctuate as investors questioned the leadership's judgment and technical competence. Board members, who had been unaware of the incident, began asking difficult questions about corporate culture and human resources practices. Riker's response to the growing controversy was to double down on his position. In a company-wide email, he characterized the incident as a minor technical issue that was resolved through standard troubleshooting procedures. He made no mention of Elijah's role in the repair, and instead praised his engineering team for their quick thinking and professional expertise. The CEO's attempt to control the narrative backfired spectacularly. Employees who had witnessed the actual events began speaking out, both internally and on social media. Dr. Sarachon, the chief technology officer, found herself in an impossible position. She could either support her CEO's false narrative or acknowledge the truth about what had occurred. The pressure on Elijah himself was immense. Media requests poured in from technology publications, major news networks, and documentary filmmakers who wanted to tell his story. Colleagues who had ignored him for years suddenly wanted to be associated with his success. The attention was both validating and overwhelming for someone who had spent decades working in anonymity. But the most significant pressure came from Langston Innovations management, who found themselves dealing with a PR nightmare that threatened to expose the systematic discrimination that had allowed such a situation to develop. HR Director Janet Morrison was tasked with conducting an internal investigation that would somehow address the controversy without admitting to any wrongdoing. The investigation revealed uncomfortable truths about the company's culture and practices. Several employees came forward with their own stories of discrimination and bias, describing a workplace where assumptions about competence were often based on race, educational background, and job title rather than actual ability. The pattern of overlooking talent among support staff was not unique to Elijah's situation, but reflected broader systematic issues within the organization. As the story continued to gain national attention, Elijah found himself at the center of a conversation that extended far beyond one company's internal problems. His experience became a symbol of the hidden talent that exists throughout the American workforce, the skilled individuals who are overlooked because they don't fit conventional expectations about what expertise looks like. The professional consequences for Riker were severe and swift. The board of directors, facing pressure from investors and negative publicity, initiated their own investigation into the CEO's conduct. The video evidence of his behavior, combined with revelations about the company's discriminatory practices, created a situation that threatened the organization's reputation and financial stability. But perhaps the most significant aspect of the struggle was Elijah's own internal conflict. After years of invisibility and marginalization, he was suddenly being offered opportunities that he had thought were lost forever. Technology companies that had once blacklisted him were now competing for his services. Academic institutions that had ignored his research were inviting him to speak at conferences and join their faculties. The choice between returning to his former career and continuing his work as a maintenance employee was not as simple as it might have appeared. Elijah had found dignity and purpose in his work, developing relationships with colleagues who valued him for his character rather than his technical abilities. The prospect of returning to an industry that had treated him so cruelly was both appealing and terrifying. The resistance he faced was not just external, but internal. The challenge of rebuilding confidence and professional identity after years of systematic marginalization. The viral video had revealed his technical expertise to the world, but it had also exposed the painful reality of how much talent is wasted when organizations fail to recognize and develop the capabilities of all their employees. The climax of Elijah's story arrived 6 weeks after the viral video had transformed him from invisible janitor to technology industry sensation. The setting was the West Coast Tech Summit, one of the industry's most prestigious conferences, where Elijah had been invited to deliver a keynote address about innovation, inclusion, and the hidden costs of discrimination in technology development. The invitation itself had been controversial. Conference organizers had faced pressure from some technology leaders who questioned whether a maintenance worker, regardless of his background, belonged on the same stage as CEOs and renowned researchers. But the public interest in Elijah's story, combined with the broader conversations about diversity and inclusion that his experience had sparked, made his participation not just appropriate but necessary. The auditorium was packed with over 3,000 attendees, including many of the same executives and engineers who had dismissed him years earlier. The irony was not lost on anyone present. The man who had been blacklisted from the industry was now being invited to address its most influential gathering. Elijah's speech, titled "The Invisible Genius: How Discrimination Wastes Our Most Valuable Resource," was both a personal reflection and a professional manifesto. He began by sharing his own story, from his early success as an AI researcher to his years of exile in maintenance work. But rather than focusing on his personal grievances, he used his experience to illustrate the broader patterns of discrimination that pervaded the technology industry. "How many Elijahs are there in your organizations?" he asked the assembled crowd. "How many brilliant minds are emptying your trash cans, cleaning your offices, or working in roles that don't match their capabilities? How much innovation are we losing because we can't see past our own biases about what genius looks like?" The speech was interrupted multiple times by sustained applause, but the most powerful moment came when Elijah demonstrated the same technical expertise that had made him famous. Using a complex AI system that had been brought on stage as a prop, he identified and fixed a programming error in real time, explaining his methodology to an audience that included some of the world's most respected computer scientists. "This is not magic," he said, as the corrected system displayed its improved performance metrics. "This is simply the application of knowledge and experience to solve problems. The ability to do this work doesn't depend on your job title, your educational credentials, or the color of your skin. It depends on your understanding of the underlying principles and your willingness to apply them systematically." The audience's response was electric. The combination of technical demonstration and social commentary created a moment of clarity that transcended the usual boundaries between technology and social justice. Elijah had proven that his expertise was not just theoretical but practical. An immediate dot, but the most dramatic moment of the summit came not from Elijah's prepared remarks, but from an unexpected confrontation in the audience. Clayton Riker, facing increasing pressure from his own board of directors, had attended the conference in a last-ditch effort to control the narrative surrounding his company's crisis. During the question-and-answer session, Riker stood up and attempted to challenge Elijah's account of the events at Langston Innovations. "Mr. Hayes," he said, his voice carrying across the auditorium, "you've told a very compelling story, but I think you're overstating the significance of what was essentially a minor technical adjustment. My engineering team had already diagnosed the problem." The audience's reaction was immediate and hostile. Attendees who had seen the viral video began shouting responses, calling out Riker's dishonesty and demanding that he acknowledge the truth about what had occurred. The confrontation created a moment of raw emotion that cut through the usual politeness at professional conferences. Elijah's response was measured and dignified. "Mr. Riker," he said, his voice calm despite the chaos in the auditorium, "I'm not here to argue about what happened that day. The video speaks for itself. I'm here to talk about what we can do to ensure that talent is recognized and developed regardless of where it's found." The exchange was captured by dozens of cameras and live-streamed to millions of viewers worldwide. The contrast between Elijah's composed professionalism and Riker's defensive desperation was stark and powerful. It crystallized the broader themes of the controversy in a way that no prepared statement could have achieved. The summit's impact extended far beyond the conference hall. Major technology companies announced new initiatives to identify and develop hidden talent within their organizations. Academic institutions created programs to support individuals who had been excluded from traditional career paths. Investment firms began requiring portfolio companies to demonstrate concrete progress on diversity and inclusion. Metrics. But perhaps the most significant outcome was the personal transformation that Elijah experienced. The man who had spent years working in invisibility had become a powerful voice for change, using his platform to advocate for others who faced similar challenges. The keynote address marked not just his return to the technology industry, but his evolution into a leader who could bridge the gap between technical excellence and social justice. The standing ovation that followed his speech lasted for over 10 minutes, but the real measure of his success was the flood of job offers, consulting opportunities, and speaking engagements that followed. The industry that had once rejected him was now competing for his services, recognizing that his unique perspective and proven expertise made him invaluable in ways they had never understood. The transformation that followed Elijah's keynote speech extended far beyond his personal career trajectory, creating ripple effects that would reshape corporate culture and industry practices for years to come. The most immediate change occurred at Langston Innovations, where the board of directors faced an impossible situation created by their CEO's behavior and the company's systematic discrimination. Clayton Riker's resignation was announced 3 days after the West Coast Tech Summit, accompanied by a board statement acknowledging serious lapses in leadership in corporate culture. The company's stock price, which had been declining since the viral video first appeared, stabilized and began to recover as investors responded positively to the leadership change. Dr. Sarah Chun was promoted to CEO, becoming one of the few women of color to lead a major technology company. The new leadership at Langston Innovations moved quickly to address the cultural issues that had enabled the discrimination. They implemented comprehensive bias training for all employees, established anonymous reporting systems for workplace discrimination, and created advancement pathways for employees in non-traditional roles. Most symbolically, they offered Elijah a position as Chief Innovation Officer with a mandate to identify and develop hidden talent throughout the organization. Elijah's decision to accept the offer was not immediate. After years of marginalization, the prospect of returning to corporate leadership was both appealing and daunting. But his acceptance came with conditions that reflected his understanding of the systemic changes necessary to prevent similar situations from occurring. He demanded control over hiring practices, budget authority for diversity initiatives, and the establishment of a company-wide program to identify and develop employees whose talents had been overlooked. The Hidden Genius Initiative that Elijah developed became a model for other organizations struggling with similar issues. The program used sophisticated assessment tools to identify technical skills and leadership potential among employees in all roles, regardless of their formal education or job titles. Within the first year, the initiative had identified over 200 employees with capabilities that exceeded their current positions, leading to promotions, additional training opportunities, and career path changes that benefited both individuals and the organization. The impact extended beyond Langston Innovations to influence industry-wide practices. The viral video and its aftermath had sparked conversations about discrimination and hidden talent that reached the highest levels of corporate leadership. Major technology companies began implementing their own programs to identify and develop overlooked talent. Driven by a combination of ethical concerns and competitive pressure, the personal transformation for Elijah was equally significant. Man who had spent years working in anonymity became a sought-after speaker, consultant, and advisor to organizations seeking to improve their diversity and inclusion efforts. His unique perspective combining technical expertise with lived experience of discrimination made him valuable to companies that were serious about creating meaningful change. The Hayes Innovation Workshop, which Elijah established in his old neighborhood, became a model for community-based STEM education. The program provided advanced technical training to young people who might not have access to traditional educational pathways, focusing particularly on students from underrepresented communities. The workshop's success rate was remarkable, with over 80% of participants going on to pursue careers in technology or related fields. The broader social impact of Elijah's story was reflected in policy changes at both corporate and governmental levels. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission began investigating companies with significant disparities between the demographics of their support staff and their professional employees. Several states introduced legislation requiring companies to demonstrate efforts to identify and develop talent at all levels of their organizations. The media attention continued for months, with Elijah's story being featured in documentaries, academic case studies, and business school curricula. His book, The Invisible Genius: Finding Excellence in Unexpected Places, became a bestseller and required reading in many corporate leadership programs. The book's central message, that talent exists everywhere, but is often overlooked due to bias and narrow definitions of expertise, resonated with readers across multiple industries. 5 years after the parking lot incident, Elijah's impact on the technology industry was undeniable. The companies that had embraced his philosophy of inclusive talent development had seen measurable improvements in innovation, employee satisfaction, and financial performance. The industry's demographics had begun to shift, with more diverse representation in leadership positions and technical roles. Perhaps most importantly, the story had changed the way people thought about their colleagues and employees. The viral video had become a cultural reference point, invoked whenever someone questioned the assumptions underlying workplace hierarchies. The phrase, "Don't judge the janitor," had entered common usage as a reminder that expertise and intelligence could be found in unexpected places. The legacy of Elijah's story was not just about one man's journey from invisibility to recognition, but about the systemic changes necessary to ensure that talent was recognized and developed regardless of where it was found. His experience had proven that the most valuable resources in any organization might be the ones that were most easily overlooked. The story of Elijah Hayes offers profound lessons about the nature of genius, the danger of assumptions, and the transformative power of recognizing talent wherever it exists. His experience demonstrates that discrimination is not just morally wrong but economically wasteful, depriving organizations of the innovation and expertise they need to succeed in increasingly competitive markets. The incident at Langston Innovations revealed the systematic nature of workplace bias, where assumptions about competence are often based on appearance, job title, and educational background rather than actual ability. The fact that a brilliant AI engineer could work as a janitor for years without his expertise being recognized shows how deeply embedded these biases are in our corporate culture. But Elijah's story also demonstrates the power of individual courage and community support in creating change. His willingness to step forward and demonstrate his capabilities, combined with the viral spread of his story through social media, created a moment of cultural reckoning that forced the technology industry to confront its own biases and limitations. The broader implications of his experience extend far beyond the technology sector. In every industry, in every organization, there are individuals whose talents are being overlooked because they don't fit conventional expectations about what expertise looks like. The challenge for leaders is to create systems and cultures that can identify and develop these hidden resources. For viewers, Elijah's story serves as both inspiration and call to action. It reminds us to look beyond surface appearances and job titles to recognize the capabilities and potential of everyone around us. It challenges us to question our own assumptions about competence and intelligence and to create environments where talent can flourish regardless of its packaging. Most importantly, it proves that change is possible when we have the courage to challenge discriminatory systems and the wisdom to recognize that our most valuable resources might be hidden in plain sight. The next time you encounter someone whose abilities seem to exceed their position, remember Elijah Hayes and consider what might be possible if we truly valued talent over titles, capability over credentials, and character over conventional expectations.